It's spooky season, which means it is time for scary stories, mysteries, and monsters that go bump in the night, which I am all for. I'm a big fan of Halloween, so all throughout October, I try to fit in as many holiday appropriate things as I can. So I thought it would be fun to go through some of the books that might help set the mood as Halloween approaches. Hey everyone, I'm Zaida and this is Read Books Get Lit. I'm super excited about today's video. If you've been here for a second, you might have heard me say in previous videos that I'm a big fan of scary stories, creepy crawly things, so it seems pretty appropriate to go through some of my favorite and most enjoyed scary stories, kind of set the mood and the tone for autumn, for Halloween, and hopefully if there's a book that you are unfamiliar with or you haven't read before, maybe you'll find something to add to your TBR list. Hey, don't show your butt to people. Say hello, first cat. Hello. Unamused, like always. Okay, you're in my lap now. The first book that I want to share is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I think I'm saying their name right. If I'm not, please correct me. So this is dark academia, urban fantasy, and I'm definitely not versed in dark academia. I used to read urban fantasy in middle school, but it has been a while since I've been, a regular customer of that genre. So when I read this a couple years ago, it was very new, and I think because I'm not really familiar with the dark academia genre or the authors that write in that genre, I feel like I liked this book more than I thought I would. And I don't know if that happens when you read outside of your typical genres, but I find that if it's totally new, something I'm unfamiliar with, I tend to enjoy it a lot more. And I think it's because it is a new genre, so I'm picking up on new topics, new themes, different kinds of tropes in this particular genre. Sometimes I'll even pay attention to the actual writing style that the author is using because obviously writing a dark academia is very different from writing, a rom-com or you know, historical fiction even. So when I'm reading these different genres that I'm not entirely used to, sometimes I feel like I'm even more present while I'm reading them because I'm trying to soak in and absorb everything, which is cool, which is fun. And usually what I found is even though I don't typically read in those genres, the books that I am reading or that I somehow come across, I end up enjoying them a lot. Usually I give them 4 or 5 stars, which is interesting because then I'll look at the reviews and obviously many of the reviewers, they do read in this genre, and sometimes when I see really critical reviews, I'm like, oh, I didn't feel that way at all, or that's not what I thought about this. So kind of interesting to see the differences between, veteran readers of the genre versus rookie readers and the opposition and our viewpoints of things. Very interesting, of course. The next book that I want to share is The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. Now, this I think is technically classified as a fantasy, although I would say that it is more so on the light, very light fantasy. I think the story, it's way more historical fiction and paranormal with some supernatural in there. Of course, we are dealing with witches. So those are the two main genres that I would put this in. Again, not really in my wheelhouse. Historical fiction, yes. Paranormal, not really. Uh, I I feel like I definitely paid closer attention to this because it was outside of my normal genre. And I really enjoyed it. I think I gave this 5 stars on Goodreads. And I wrote a review, which I used to be very diligent with writing my book reviews. But then I kind of slacked and stopped writing it for every single one. And then I kind of, if it was a really good book and I felt very strongly about my point of view, whether it was a good review or a bad review, if I just felt really strongly and I wanted to share it, then I would post it on Goodreads. And I think I actually posted a review for this. So that's how much I enjoyed it. I think the witch aspect was fun for me. I really like witchy stories, movies, TV shows. Unfortunately, though, for me, I found them to be really hit or miss. Most of the books, like the witchy books I've read, have been miss, which is a bummer. But this one was definitely a hit. Again, I really like the cross genre historical fiction paranormal. And I really think that the way that Alexis Henderson wrote and described the environment within the story. You know, there's a lot of woods and there's a small village, and I think that really lends itself to the overall tone of the book. It's very like eerie. You can feel the dread, and that it builds throughout the story, which I, again, very much enjoyed. So I would recommend this if you are looking for something with really nice atmospheric writing. If you checked out my previous vlog where I went to an author talk for Susan Dennard while she was here in Portland on her book tour, I briefly mentioned this book, but I wanted to bring it back again. It's pretty seasonal appropriate. So this is The Luminaries by Susan Dennard. This is book 1 in the trilogy. I do have books 2 and 3. I have not read them yet, but I will get to them eventually. This book was really fun because, again, it was outside of my normal genre. I was also going through a reading slump at that time, so I needed something to kind of kickstart the flow and get the momentum going. And this book was really good for that. You know, the characters are fun. You kind of love them or hate them. Maybe you love them and hate them. It's very much moody, small town, very gloomy. You know, there's monsters, there's secrets, there's, you know, shadows and nightmares and hunter trials. It reminded me of an episode of Supernatural. You know, I've watched every episode of Supernatural more than once. I love that show, even when it kind of went off the rails. Anyway, but this book reminded me of an episode, or maybe not an episode, but like an arc that could have happened in Supernatural. So that might have been why I enjoyed it a little bit more. But anyway, this is just a fun book. Definitely recommend. And, you know, once I read the other 2, I will let you know how that goes. This next book is the 3rd book in this series, but it's by far my favorite in the series. It's actually the only one that I still own. I donated the other 3, but I kept this one, and it happily lives on my shelf. And that is Escaping from Houdini by Carrie Maniscalco from the Stalking Jack the Ripper series. Now, I'm pretty sure that fans, like hardcore fans of Stalking Jack the Ripper, are probably going to disagree with me on this one. I've collectively seen fans really kind of rip this book apart. They do not like it at all. I love it. I think it's the most fun of the entire series. Out of all 4 books, this is the funnest one by far. I should probably rewind and give a little bit of backstory on the Stalking Jack the Ripper series if you're not familiar with it. So it's a 4-book series, historical fiction, paranormal, supernatural, romance, fantasy-ish, so a lot of genres. But it follows Aubrey Rose. She is a young woman in her teens. I think the first book, it's in the Victorian era. So, of course, not a lot of agency for young girls and women. And of course, Aubrey Rose is very strong willed, very determined. She has an interest in science and, the medical side of things. So, a lot of obstacles in her way. But it's a fun series. I do really appreciate the framework of this series. So every book, Audrey Rose is kind of put into a time or a place of real historical significance surrounding a specific person or a specific event, and of course, ingratiates herself within that time or place. So, again, a pretty fun framework. I really enjoyed it, but this one was my favorite of them all. I think one of the cool elements about this, which makes it stand out from the other three, is that this is a closed door or a locked room mystery. So everything happens on this ship. Audrey Rose and her companion, I don't really know if they're courting yet at this point in time. I can't remember. Anyway, his name is Thomas Cresswell. He's a book boyfriend. Fans love him. But they are on this ship. They are on their way to New York from England. So they are crossing the Atlantic, and everything happens on this ship. So, as a fan of mysteries, I really liked the closed door element of this. Plus, the people on this ship are wild and wacky and very exciting. So, I think that's one reason why I really like this book, because of literally the setting. Like, they're on this ship, this is where they are, and that adds, sort of that heightened urgency to solve the murders, to figure everything out, to, unmask the killer and whatnot. So that's one of my favorite things about this. One thing I should point out is that in this book, there is a love triangle, although it's like a soft love triangle, because I really don't think that the third point is actually genuinely interested in Audrey Rose. I think it's kind of just a front. It's just to, entertain himself, and it's just a thing to do. But I really don't believe that he's genuinely interested in Audrey Rose. Anyway, that's besides the point. I typically do not like love triangles just in general, because they're not done well. They don't sell it for me. It's not believable. But this one, again, it was just fun. And the points, of course, Aubrey Rose, and then Thomas Cresswell. And then the third one is the ringleader slash magician of the carnival that is on the ship with them. His name is Mephistopheles. He's very charming. He's very quippy, very witty, and I think he wears like a mask, like just over the eyes mask, which reminded me, if you've seen the movie Mirror Mask, it's a Neil Gaiman movie, came out in 2005. Shout out to my friend Chelsea, who turned me on to this movie. It's very fun. But there's a character in that movie, his name is Valentine, and it's part of, like, I guess technically a mask, but it's just like covering his eyes. And for some reason, when I was reading this book, I was picturing Valentine from Mirror Mask. Anyway, that's a tangent. Back to the love triangle. So I know, having read some of the comments and some of the reviews, people really hate this love triangle because they thought it was pointless. Like, this was just, they wanted more screen time or page time with Thomas Cresswell because he's obviously OTP, which I get. I mean, we all know he's OTP. But that's what made this love triangle fun, is because, I mean, at least from my point of view, I knew it wasn't serious, but it's making Thomas Cresswell like sweat. And in the other three books, the romance, the will they, won't they, back and forth type of thing, that's going to get old after a while. After two books, going into the third book with the same type of approach to their romance, that's going to get boring. And so I think that the the third book throwing in this extra character to kind of, ruffle things up was perfect timing. And it only enhanced the fourth book and that arc between Audrey Rose and Thomas Cresswell. This set up for that, right? So it was a balancing act, people. It's all part of the bigger picture. I wanted to throw this book in there because I'm pretty sure not a lot of people will have any knowledge about this whatsoever, which is fine. Again, bringing diversity to the channel. That's what I'm here for. So this is a collection of stories. This is called Obake, Ghost Stories in Hawaii by Glenn Grant. If you were growing up in the 80s, 90s in Hawaii, you probably have heard of Glenn Grant. You may not have read his stories or articles, but there's a good chance that you've heard about him. So he's a historian, storyteller, author, and this specific collection I remember reading in elementary school, and it goes through some of the local ghost stories from people in Hawaii. And I feel like I should kind of give a little bit of definition between obake and then obake in Hawaii. So obake in Japanese, it kind of just means like supernatural creature, like a yokai, if you're familiar with that. But it's specific, supernatural creatures in Japanese folklore. That's what obake means. Obake in Hawaii, in contemporary times, it's sort of a blanket term that we will use to reference ghost stories. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like ghost stories. It could also mean, spirits like ghouls. It could be goblins. It could be, monsters, fairies, all that kind of stuff. So it's a much looser term used in contemporary times in Hawaii, very much a blanket statement of ghost stories, right? So this kind of goes through a handful of stories that I remember hearing just from like word of mouth or from like my parents or grandparents, and actually being able to like read sort of like a transcript from his interviews that he's done with people who had these stories. So I don't remember how many there are. There's probably about 7 or 8 stories. The fun thing about this is if you're from Hawaii, most of the stories in this collection, they take place on Oahu, which is the island that I'm from. So reading through it and recognizing the place names like Mo'iliili Cemetery, right? I know exactly where that is. Or, someplace in Kaimuki. It's fun and kind of interesting, like retrospectively thinking like, oh man, like I've been there before. Or, oh, I was there at night and I thought I saw something weird happen. Maybe it was related to this. So that's just kind of a cool thing. This isn't our original book. We had one growing up and lost it, but I found this on the continent. I think it might have been in Idaho. I'm not quite sure. But the fact that this is here on the continent makes me very, very happy because you don't find many books locally published on the continent. So this was a really fun find. I had to add this last collection in this video because it would not be complete without it. So this is a collection of stories by the one and only Edgar Allan Poe. What's really fun about this particular edition is that it has illustrations in it, which is very fun. And I did not read, or I hadn't yet read all of the stories in this prior to getting this book. It has classics like The Telltale Heart, The Fall of the House of Usher, but before I read this, I hadn't yet read The Mask of the Red Death or The Cask of Amontillado. I might be saying that incorrectly. Apologies. But those two in particular were some of my favorites in this collection. Edgar Allan Poe is just classic, right? Gothic horror. You know what you're getting into when you're diving into Poe. But I think, aside from the the awful and the damned and the grisly and the macabre, like, aside from those typical themes that you're going to get, I think what makes Poe really stand out and memorable is the stories. They all have intertwined within them a type of psychological horror, which I feel just elevates the intensity and the fright factor with all of the different characters, the different circumstances that they get put in. So definitely the psychological aspect of it and how Poe was able to incorporate that within these stories is, in my opinion, one of the best aspects of his writing by far. First Cat just got off the couch and wanted to join us, and joined us just in time to say goodbye. So that is a wrap on today's video. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I mentioned, or if you haven't and some of them were interesting to you. Maybe you're going to add it to your TBR list. Let me know in the comments below. Also, if you have any other book recommendations for, spooky stories, witchy books, supernatural things, I definitely love to hear about them as well. I'm always looking to add more of those types of books to my list, so any recommendations would be very much appreciated. As always, if there was something you liked about this video, please like and subscribe. It can definitely help the channel and I appreciate it. I know my videos get long. I go off on tangents most times, so the fact that you're here watching with me, I really do appreciate the support. It means a lot. And First Cat, I think she appreciates it too, right? Can't really tell with First Cat, but I'm just gonna say she appreciates it. Anyway, I will see you all in the next video. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Until next time, bye. Say bye, First Cat. Bye-bye. Yeah, not amused. It's okay.